Hey everybody, this is Eric Murphy. Thank you so much for joining my new channel. I'm really excited to see you here, and I know I've been sitting on this video in particular, a part 2 interview with Matt of a debate that I did in Tennessee, and it's about time we get this out here. So without further ado, here's the interview. Hey and welcome, this is Eric Murphy, and you're here at my channel, and we are here at Matt Dillahunty's studio. How's it going, Matt?
It's going well.
Dude, so this is part 2. Part 1 is on your channel.
Mm-hmm.
I've been doing debates recently, and you've been kind enough to put them up on your channel while I didn't have one, and we've been reviewing them. And so we just finished part 1, and now I kind of want to break down just a little bit more because this is kind of your thing. I mean, how many debates have you done before? Like, do you have an estimate?
I have no idea.
You have no idea.
Yeah, it's funny because Dan Barker, who's done a gazillion, knows exactly how many he's done. It's in the 80, 90, whatever, 100. I couldn't tell you. And one of the things is it's probably a moderately low number in the 20, 30, 40 range for actual like public structured debates. Mm-hmm. But I consider what we end up doing on Atheist Experience stuff to be little mini debates, and
Well, I've noticed that it is fundamentally different just on a stage and out in front of people. And dude, I've got to tell you, I had no idea that it was going to be as scary as it was. But I do want to say thank you for being there and talking through all of it. And I kind of wanted to hit a couple things that happened in this last debate, kind of ask what your opinion was.
Sure. Yeah. No.
So,
and I love the fact that I get to host your stuff and potentially other people's. Although, your future debates you'll be putting up on your own channel. So,
yep.
Glad to help that out. But I'm not the ultimate arbiter of what is or isn't a good debate or a good way to do something. I like the fact that that you have a much different approach than I do, and I think that resonates with an audience. But as you're well aware, both of our approaches in a formal debate are going to be slightly different than they are from a call on the TV show.
Absolutely. And, well, when it comes to callers, I've been getting less patient, and it seems like you've been getting more patient. So we'll see kind of how that goes.
I find it very amusing.
Yeah. But, okay, so back to this. First off, I want to bring up the topic of the debate. When you hear is it necessary?
Do we need God to make sense of life?
Do we need God to make sense of life? You remember that better than I did. When you kind of come across that, what do you think? What's running through your head? Is that a debate that you would pick up?
I'll pick up almost any debate. I just, I recorded a video kind of about debate topics, which will be up on my channel this month. And I picked this one in particular because when I first heard it, it was, do we need God to make sense of life? Well, what the hell does that mean? Does that mean we are incapable of making sense of life, so we need God to do the thinking for us, to be the one who makes sense of life? Does it mean, is it necessary for there to be a God in order for us to be capable of making sense of life? And then there was the whole question about, well, are we only talking about biology? I mean, the life portion in there. I go through that, and what I ultimately decided was that I think the intent of this debate topic was, is it necessary to appeal to a God to be able to make sense of reality? Because that'll let you go anywhere. I probably would have asked if we could word it that way, because if that's what we all agree we're talking about, it's probably better if we make the debate topic as clear as possible. But I'm not as picky about what the topic is as other people, because I know it's going to go all over the place. The first, half dozen debates that I did, no matter what the topic that was written down, they turned into a debate about morality, because morality is the one kind of go-to for, without God, everything will just go to hell in a handbasket and anything goes.
Okay, so do you mean like formal debates or informal kind of sit down like this last one was?
Informal, I care even less because you don't have a topic. It's not like we're there and here's the written topic and I'm going to claim a technical victory. Whether it's a formal debate or not, I would want to say what is it that we're actually discussing, irrespective of how it was originally worded. If we can figure out what we're actually discussing and can agree on that, then it's fine. I don't care what the publicized title of the debate was.
Fair enough. I actually have seen that, and that's definitely something that I've seen with the people who've been doing this a lot longer, like you, is if there's the opportunity, you jump on it. And this debate was actually a really big opportunity for me. I wound up having to spend a good bit of money out of pocket just to get there.
Sure.
How long did it take? Like, how long were you putting into this until it became a viable career? I mean,
I'll let you know when it does. So I worked in software and other stuff for the first 10 years of kind of being host on the Atheist Experience.
Yeah.
And I had a regular job, and I used all of my vacation days, except for like 4 or 5 that I would save to do. You know, Beth and I like to go visit family for Christmas or whatever.
Sure.
But other than that, I've earned all my vacation days, tons of any extra income I had, to make sure that I could do as many events as I possibly could. And not just debates, but hey, I'm going to go to this convention and I'm going to do a talk and things like that.
Yeah.
Fortunately, about 4 years ago, I started up the Atheist Debates Patreon project, and had built enough of an audience and following, and kind of demonstrated, I don't know, some small ability to do this, that enough people wanted to watch, that activism and debating lectures and stuff has been essentially my full-time job for 4 years now. But it was a full decade plus, and probably closer to a decade and a half before anything ever. The first debate I did in public, the first big formal debate, was at UMBC, and I got paid for it, but you'd have to debate every week all year round at those rates to have anything close to a reasonable income. Good news is that with the advent of YouTube and social media, there are other avenues, Patreon and things like that, and also interest in debates kind of waxes and wanes. There was a period where I know I did 4 debates in 2 months once, and I've also gone 6, 7, 8 months without a real serious formal debate. So it's not the path I would recommend people go on.
Well,
but learning it is how you have better conversations as individuals with your family members, your friends, and everything else. You're not in that rigid structure. You're not in front of an audience. So the heat is somewhat off. And if you've paid attention and actually spent time thinking about these as if you were going to do a debate, all of a sudden the conversations become much better.
Definitely. Kind of the reason I bring that up and want to talk about that a bit is because it appears that nobody's really kind of jumped into that scene in a long time. It's very rare for people to be able to get into that. And it wasn't until I was volunteering with the ACA and then going out and doing it on my own to figure out why the hell that is. So
it's a niche market. It's hard. Yeah. And actually, I think that the formal structured debates are kind of vanishing and being replaced with, let's have an informal discussion where we have a topic we're going to address. I prefer that much more. I prefer being able to, I don't want to have to borrow the line I borrow all the time from West Wing, a joint press conference where I read a statement, you read a statement, I read a statement, because we didn't even have to show up for that. I could have mailed something in and found somebody, far more handsome or well-spoken to read the statement I prepared. It's the discussions and the directed questions. That's where the audience gets to see who's actually spent time thinking about this and who's just waiting for their turn to pull out the next sentence that they memorized before they got there. And can you think on the fly?
Well, and I definitely saw that. And I know that during this last debate that I had, I don't know, does it qualify as one? I don't know if it...
I don't care. I did a series of what I said was 3 nights of debate at a Church of Christ in San Antonio. They refused to call them debates. They wanted to call them dialectic discussions. I don't care what they call them. There were 2 people with different views who were arguing back and forth and pointing out why and how they didn't agree with the other one.
Okay. Okay. Nice. All right. Well, I don't know. I don't know what qualifies. Those
are the
so
things I
much.
never concern with. Was it a debate? Okay. If you want to say it wasn't a debate, I don't care. I showed up. We had a topic. We talked about it. We argued. We remained respectful.
We got nowhere near the topic.
That was a frustrating point for me.
Yeah,
As a
me
matter of fact,
too.
you and I watched it together afterwards, and I remember I was sitting back there, and after the 4 opening statements, I was like, I'm not convinced that any of the 4 of you actually addressed the subject directly. It was all
Yeah, we're all kind
around
of
the
circling
periphery.
around it. Well, my first thought going into it was if they want to present this presup point, and I actually did ask them just straight out before the debate, are you going to be using presuppositionalist, dialogue in there? Oh yeah, that's our playbook.
Yep.
And they were very upfront about it. And so I thought, okay, I'm not going to do their work for them. They're going to need to do that. And
when
then I can
watched the
respond.
debate, I didn't see. I saw a couple hints of kind of standard presuppositional stuff, and instead it even went off from there. I mean, in their mind, they're thinking, "Oh, you can't have a grounding for logic without God. You can't have a grounding for morality without God. You can't have a grounding for better without God." And it was evident, but nothing was put together in a clear sense on their side that really addressed it from a precept view. It was fine. I mean, I understood what their view was, and that's probably one of the most important things. Is you may not have the background to dig in a certain area, but if you can clearly help other people understand what you think and why you think it, that should be good enough.
Honestly, I didn't feel like it went there most of the time. I knew where they were going with the better piece. They knew where they were going with the better piece. I am not convinced that a single person in the audience had any idea where they were going with the better piece, because where they wanted to go with the better piece was you need to have an objective standard. You have to have the best. That way you can move towards it. And the best is God. Without God, you can't determine what is better than anything else. That's kind of the standard line. But because it never got there, it felt like there was this meta discussion that we were having. And we were the only ones in it. And everyone else was just kind of a bystander. And so when they would ask this question, I wanted to respond, but also wanted to have the audience in and walking through, and it never got there.
There's an example that I came up with years ago, which I love and I've used in there. When we start talking about whether or not something is objective or subjective, there's all these complaints about, you don't have an objective standard. I piddle around with woodworking, and you could say, hey, is this board 18 inches? And is the method that I'm using to cut a board to 18 inches, how accurate is it? And we can find one that's better than another by measuring against, hey, boom, 18 inches. Nope, this one's a 1/4 inch short. This one's a 1/4 inch long. This one, on an angle. And as long as we define that we want a straight cut at 18 inches, then we now have an objective standard where we can do that. But you don't have to do that in woodworking. As a matter of fact, if you watch a lot of the old school woodworkers, you don't ever need an objective set measuring stick of X inches. If you want to create a bench that is, or a chair, let's say, what you need are all relative measurements. And that's what most woodworkers work with, is we're going to square this board off. We're going to make this edge true, and then we're going to do everything else relative to that one. We don't ever have to pull out a ruler and say, I want this side to be an inch, this side to be an inch, this side to be an inch, and this side to be an inch. You get one side true, you get a 90 degree, and then everything else is relative to it. And when you build the bench, you don't say, I want a bench that's 18 inches to the seat or 23 inches to the seat, and then this. What you do is you say, hey, what's the comfortable height to sit on for the person I'm making this bench for? And you cut it at that, and you make sure that each of the 4 legs are the same length without ever measuring or caring how many inches those legs are, they are the same relative to each other. And that puts your platform at the height, and that height is now relative to the person who's going to be sitting into it. It could be the case that that relative system of measuring, not really measuring, but of building,
Yeah, just
turns out to be objectively better. That if your ultimate standard is, did I get a chair done in an efficient fashion, where the chair doesn't wobble, and is the right height for the person I'm making it for, if I can do all of that without ever pulling out a ruler, and it's all just relative, that might actually result in a better seat. And so all these objections that people have about how, well, that's just subjective, that's just relative. Well, that's just an assertion that we need an objective standard when we probably don't.
damn. That's really good.
I like it.
Yeah.
It's not going to be true for everything everywhere all the time, but it does kind of quell the objections to people panicking. Oh my gosh, if we don't have a yardstick, how are we going to know whether or not how we're going to build a table? Build a damn table.
Yeah. Yeah. Build your morality. Let's start and go from there.
Yeah.
I like that.
If it wobbles, cut a leg off till it stops wobbling. If it's too low, start over. Make some new legs.
I like that a lot. Thank you. I'm going to steal that.
By all means.
Yeah.
You should too.
Okay, that is actually another thing that I want to bring up is people say, "Oh, wow, this got stolen from this person. How dare they?"
Okay.
You were one of the first debaters that I ever saw online. And so I thought everything you said was absolutely original. And then I started watching other debaters, and people throughout the years, and I realized, no, you cribbed this from over here, and you found this over here, and that over there, and you put together the best that you had using the best that you had available. And I don't think people appreciate that fact.
There's probably some things that I've said where I might have been the first person to say it or say it that way.
Sure.
But I don't ever claim ownership or originality to the ideas and concepts, because anytime I've thought I came up with something novel, it would be, no, Aristotle said this, or David Hume pointed this out, or Voltaire did this. And so I don't mind if people borrow. What bugs me is on occasion I'll come up with, like if somebody took the woodworking example and ran with it, that's fine. But if they're passing it off as if this was an original thought that I came up with, that's going to dig at me, because when I present things, I very rarely say, oh, here's an original thought that I came up with. And I'm sure somebody else in history has made the point about, relative measurements to, objective standard measurements, which, by the way, those objective standard measurements, they're all freaking arbitrary. A foot is a foot.
Because we all decided
because that's how long somebody's foot was.
Yeah.
We got, oh my gosh, from the nose to the tip of the finger, we had things that were based on human beings. Oh, why do we use these measurements? Oh, because that was the rock that we had handy, and that became the standard. It's very rare that we have something that is a measuring standard that is objectively tied to something else. And when it comes to things like time, at some point, while it seemed relatively arbitrary, we standardized on, here's exactly how long a second is, so that we're all keeping time the same. We have found a much more precise way of doing it. And that can be good. And in some cases, it's probably necessary. I just don't think it's necessary for better. Better is already, by definition, a relative comparison. Is X better than Y? I don't need to know what the best is or what the best could be. It's nice if I do. It's nice if I know how things are supposed to work, so I can tell how far we are from it. Mm-hmm. But I don't have to know what best is to know that A is better than B.
I love that. Damn. Okay. Where else did we go in the debate? We went up against straw atheists, and I know we talked about that in the first video.
Yeah.
Is that something that you come across
Honestly,
commonly,
no.
Or
it's
I feel like I did my first two debates, and one of them absolutely shot in a completely different direction and gave me nothing, and the second was this kind of thrown together type of thing. What's your experience with that?
It's very, so occasionally I'll hear from somebody who will say, I used to be an atheist, or I was an atheist and now I'm not. I really like to dig in on those because I want to find out what they mean by I used to be an atheist. Okay, why were you an atheist previously? Because if you weren't an atheist for the same reasons that I am, then the fact that you changed your mind should have no impact on me at all. Because if you were an atheist because you got mad at a God, and now you're no longer mad at a God, okay, well, I'd argue that you weren't really an atheist because I don't know how you could be mad at a God when you don't believe in him.
Yeah.
If you were an atheist because somebody just flat out lied to you at some point about some aspect of reality and you later found out that that was a lie, okay, I'm glad you found out that you were lied to. But that has nothing to do with whether or not there's a God. And if it's not the same reasons that I believed, then we're not in the same boat. So stop quoting atheists to me. Stop saying you used to be an atheist. Even if you were an atheist for the same reasons that I am, now the only thing that matters is the arguments and evidence that changed your mind, should they have. And the closest anybody can get to it is to talk about their personal experience with a God,
Right.
which is kind of what you got. You got a guy who said, oh, I was an atheist and I was terrible. I just lied to people. It was all about hedonism. It was all about, me taking care of me and not caring about other people. And then I realized that that's not the way God wanted me to be. And so I gave in and let God. Well, hang on a minute. How did you realize that that's not the way God wanted you to be? And even worse, how do you know that the way you think God wants you to be is what God wants you to be? And let's add to that. How do you know that the way you think God wants you to be is actually better? And that's the other aspect of better that got overlooked during that. They think they have an objective standard and that you have a subjective one. Show me your objective standard. Well, show me what God actually wants and why it is better. Because they can't do that. And for most of them, if we're talking about a particular religion, they are tied in some sense to their holy book. Actually, somebody asked me this week to do a video, which I'll probably do next week, about the type of people who are like, not just say I'm spiritual but not religious, but I'm a follower of Jesus, but I'm not concerned with the specifics of what's in the Bible. That's one I'm kind of working on. It's fairly rare. And I have yet to actually be in a debate with someone who says, I used to be an atheist. And then when we dig in on the subject, I've never come across anybody who was a skeptic, critical thinker, who understood burden of proof. It was more of I didn't have a reason to believe, or I was in denial, or something like that.
Well, I mean, most people find their way into religion not for logical reasons at all. And so, no, they wouldn't be able to provide that.
As far as I can tell, the people who have this personal revelation thing, which is kind of where I started going and didn't finish, I can't prove that they didn't have a personal revelation from a God. I don't know their life experience. I wasn't there to experience it. I can't be their brain and know what they felt or thought.
Right.
The problem is I don't know how they could possibly demonstrate it. I could say, I have a personal revelation from Lord Voldemort, from Harry Potter, from whatever. How do I prove that to somebody? And for me, and this is the part that a lot of my theist friends get stuck on, is I acknowledge your belief may be rationally justified based on personal revelation, but there's no way to demonstrate that to anybody else. And for me, that's a massive roadblock. If I ever had something that I believed merely because it was revealed to me, I would have to be mired in doubt about that. I'm not talking about just a personal experience. I believe there's a light there because I can look over and see it. And this is about trusting my senses, but also I can go over and test that, and I can have you test it, and we can get independent confirmation. You can't do any of those things when it's something that's plugged directly into your brain, or you're convinced is plugged directly into your brain by some magical supernatural source.
Yeah. I'm sorry, but throughout all of this, I agree with you on most of it. So we went through that.
And you're right. No,
maybe, hopefully.
Hopefully.
Or
maybe at least not wrong. It's one of the reasons why I go to chess quite often for examples, because a lot of people look at games as in the goal is to win. I'd argue that in chess the goal is to not lose, because quite often you're going to end up with stalemates, and that's better than losing. It'd be nice to win if you could, but chess isn't solved. Tic-tac-toe is a solved game, which means we know, perfect play will result in a tie. We don't know if that's true for chess or not. I believe draughts or checkers is also solved so that you can know what perfect play is, or at least it's close to it. But chess isn't. So how can you say that the goal of chess is to win if perfect play leads to a draw? If it's closer to tic-tac-toe in the end, although it's far more complicated, then it seems that the goal is to not mess up and lose.
Well, let's tie this into debating, right? What is your goal when you go into a debate? Because I know mine, but I want to know if it matches.
Yeah, I don't win, lose, draw. I don't care about those things with regard to debates. When somebody calls into the show or I have a debate opponent, I'm not trying to change their mind. I'm happy if their mind changes. I'm trying to present the case that I think ought to change their mind. But more than that, I'm trying to show why I don't accept what they accept. And the ultimate goal is for the people who are watching to learn something and have a better understanding. Maybe it's atheist normalcy, to where, oh, these godless people, they're just evil. Well, I want to change that perception. Oh, these people don't have good reasons for not believing. I want to change that perception. I want to be able to come up and say, here's where the burden of proof rests and why. And I'm not saying that you are wrong about whether or not a God exists. I'm saying I don't agree with you about whether or not a God exists because I think the methodology that you've used is wrong, and I want to be able to show why you and I don't agree.
Yeah. I think I would phrase it a little differently for myself.
And shorter.
Yeah, probably. But I need to learn how to fill space a little better anyway, so that's all right. I get nervous.
Succinct is great. I think one of the reasons why I'm far more verbose than other people is I have a terrifying fear of a lack of clarity. So I will say things 2 or 3 different ways over a span of time so that maybe one of them will stick. And that if there was confusion about the one, when they merge all 3 of the different ways I said it, now there's clarity.
That's good to know. That's good to know. It kind of gives some insight into why you do that. For me, yeah, it is about the people watching, but it's more than just that. I have this mental image of myself as a Christian watching this. And every time I think to myself, would that have upset me? And would that have caused me to backfire effect, dive in and go, you know what, I want to prove this wrong. I want to learn more about my Bible. I want to learn more about my faith. Is it causing people to take an interest in the subject of philosophy and theology? And if it is, then I think that it's a natural progression to want to develop your tool set, develop your epistemology. And as that goes, I think that it helps everywhere in life. And so, yes, I do think about myself as a Christian and convincing that young me.
Yeah.
And also hopefully challenging the epistemic framework of other atheists too, but
it's something I consider. It's one thing I didn't mention is, I'm trying to learn more about my opponent's view. I am, in fact, interested in learning more about how and why people believe things. It's just that after this many years of doing it, I don't get many surprises, and I tend to hear the same things over and over again. So there's an interest in understanding how and why they believe, and if there's ever a novel, argument or evidence presented from them, I can't wait. It's awesome. But yeah, I hadn't really dug in the way you did, but probably somewhere in the back of my head, I'm trying to present what I think would have convinced 15-year-old me or 16-year-old me when I was at the height of my religiosity. That if that kid saw me, it would have an impact that would be positive, that might make it so I wasn't 30, by the time I found my way out. Maybe I could find it out sooner.
Yeah. I absolutely love it. I know that that we spend a lot of time together, and I really, when it comes to this, I had no idea what I was getting into.
Me neither.
But you had to go through it, and you didn't have somebody that you could talk to. Not like
Oh,
this.
that's not true.
Who did you have to talk to?
So
Wait, you didn't barrel through this by yourself? You, Matt Dillahunty, didn't fucking stake the claim in the mountain that you're standing on all by your bootstraps?
no. So I'd done it before I ever did the first kind of public formal debate. I'd been doing the TV show for a while, and I was comfortable, and I was no longer bothered by public speaking, and I knew what I thought. The first,
Well, hold on. I did the show, and I was no longer bothered by public speaking.
I used to be terrified of public speaking.
Yeah, I still get terrified of public speaking, and I do the show, but
it's
if
easy.
you put me in a different setting, and I'm not looking at a camera, and that, you didn't have that? Like, did it just translate across like that?
No. So I was going to be a preacher.
Okay.
I didn't want to do it, in part because I was terrified of public speaking. Even early on when I was working with the ACA, the first, like I had to go give a press statement on the steps of the Capitol about something, and I was nervous then. The first lecture that I ever gave was to the ACA. There's a video of it up there somewhere. I just, over a period of time, I learned, hey, you know what? If you're not trying to bullshit people, if you're willing to acknowledge, or say I don't know when you actually don't know, if you try not to pretend that you know things that you don't, public speaking's easy. And the only stumbling block for a lot of people is, what if they don't like me? What if people hate me? And when I realized that a lot of people were going to not like me or hate me before I ever even opened my mouth, all of a sudden things were a lot easier. And all of a sudden, after doing it a couple times, there was nothing left to be scared of. And the only time I ever got nervous after a couple of years of doing it was like, actually, if I was doing a magic show and was putting a new illusion in for the first time ever, I'd be nervous because, like, oh my gosh, did I practice enough? Did I get this right? Because something's different. And now I just developed habits where that's not even a problem anymore.
So, where did you get your help?
For the first couple of big public debates, I didn't really reach out to too many people. And for the first one, I probably over-prepared. I really wish that it wasn't possible to over-prepare. Like, you can never be too... I think you can. I think that you can get so mired in specific things that probably aren't going to come up that you end up overlooking. So maybe it's not fair to say I over-prepared. Maybe saying I misprepared or I prepared in the wrong direction.
Okay.
After the first debate happened, it was... The person I debated was on a Christian radio show, and they were being interviewed. And the debate had been about morality. And the interviewer said something like, yeah, I watched the debate last night, and it seemed like Matt really just hadn't spent any time at all thinking about morality prior to this debate. And that comment was so, like, that would be something that the younger me or the old me would have shut off. I'd have just been, oh my gosh, I've stepped in over my head. I shouldn't be doing this. And the second she said it, I was like, these people really have no interactions with atheists, have no idea what they're talking about. Morality is probably one of the things I've dug in on the most, and I presented this case, whereas my opponent just came up and agreed with me through the whole debate and then went into a tirade at the end of it about pornography and other stuff. And I'm like, there's not a sensible, rational world in which a reasonable person could look at that debate and think that he knew or understood more about morality than I did. It was the exact opposite. And, I knew about Dunning-Kruger and other things like that. But this is not that. Dunning-Kruger is overestimating your capabilities because you don't know how good something can be.
Right.
This is just an inversion of, well, you agree with me, and I'm going to go with your presupposition that God's required for morality, so clearly you understand morality better. And they just ignored everything I said. At that point, I was not the slightest bit concerned about whether the person I was on stage with had 1 PhD, 12 PhDs, had been debating thousands of times over all the... None of that mattered anymore. But there's a private
it scared the shit out of me when I went up against David
It
Wood.
should.
Because he's got all of these books. He has over 60 moderated debates under his belt. He has a PhD in philosophy. I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I'm
It should
way
be
over my head.
nerve-wracking. It's what keeps you humble enough to recognize that, hey, I don't have to know everything. And by the way, I'm not the one selling something. If we're debating religion, they're the ones selling something. They have the duty to convince people. One of the things I pointed out once upon a time was, if my opponent gets up and says, here's what Matt needs to do to prove me wrong, my first response would be, actually, that's wrong. Matt doesn't have to say a thing to prove you wrong. If you fail to make your case, this debate's over, and I can just sit up here and blab. Because if you don't make your case, I win. Because my case is that you haven't and cannot make your case. It's not that your case is wrong. That's the thing, is when you start using, critical thinking skills and properly apply a burden of proof. There is, I wouldn't normally have mentioned this, but since we're probably close to the end and you asked.
Yeah.
There is a private email group of a handful of prominent atheist debaters. And we don't use it much, but on occasion somebody will be, say, hey, I've got this debate coming up and I'm thinking about using this. Will you guys pick this argument apart? And so there are a handful of people who go in there and do it. I don't think I've ever posted with a specific argument for help, but being involved in watching those discussions was definitely helpful. And then I have some really good friends. Dan Barker has been helpful many times over the years. He's done far more debates than I have. Eddie Taposh is phenomenal, and he and I will just sit down and talk about debating at the American Atheist Convention and stuff like that. And we don't necessarily agree. He's got subjects that he won't debate, which I will happily debate, which I talked about in the other video about debate topics. But yeah.
Rock on, man. I mean, it's nice to know that I'm not the only one feeling this way, and that it does take time, and I'm really, really excited about it, man.
It was a couple of years before. I mean, they were always fun, and it was always something I needed to do, and it's always something I wanted to do well, and I wanted to have the right goals in mind. Now they're almost entirely just fun, and I don't mean like, oh, it's a roller coaster, I'm just going to go out and play. I mean, I legitimately enjoy them. There's no more stress, because at the end of the day, what's the worst thing that can happen? They make a compelling argument for the existence of God, and I learned something new that I might have been wrong about.
Yeah.
And how is that considered worst? Because now I've learned something. It's like there's no way this can go wrong unless I walk up on stage and I'm a disrespectful jackass, if I'm engaged in dishonest arguments, if I'm attacking people instead of ideas, if I put myself in a position where I'm a poor representative of reason, of skepticism, of humanism, of the atheist community at large, that's the only way this fails. If I go up and I'm genuinely engaged in a conversation, I'm willing to say I don't know when I don't know. I'm willing to point out why I don't agree on things. There's nothing that can go wrong. It can turn out no way but positive. The truth has nothing to fear from inquiry, and there's not a single debate that could ever be a catastrophe if both of the participants are honestly trying to have a conversation. But even if only one of us is, it better be me.
Dude, I
Or
noticed.
you if you're the one doing the debating.
Well, yeah, of course. I noticed that all of the nerves and anxiety, it was rough all the way up until I stepped on stage. As soon as you're up there, as soon as you're doing it, it just goes away.
Some people melt the second they get on stage because all the anticipation gets to a point where it just cascades and shuts down their brain. Other people realize it's kind of like the fight or flight response. And when you get to that moment where now it's on, boom, you're on, and debates are performance.
Yeah.
It's, you either learn to fight or you fly. And now the only time, I used to say or I've said before, the only time I actually get nervous is when I'm in a one-on-one conversation with someone I'm in a relationship with, somebody I genuinely care about, where we disagree. If I was sitting down with, my parents, which rarely happened, although it happened at Christmas, and I point out that this year at Christmas, there was no nerves, because I'd reached a point where the worst thing that I thought could happen was if my parents cut me out of their life because I no longer agreed with them. And while I realize that not everybody's going to get to this point anytime soon or ever, I reached a point where I cared more about them loving me for me than I did about their acceptance. And so if they were willing to cut me out of their life because we didn't agree on religion, I was fine with that. I'd have been sad.
Yeah.
But I valued being appreciated for who I am and what I am more than trying to be worried about if they're going to ostracize me because I don't fit their mold. And now I don't get nervous at all.
So, for anybody who's watching that says, oh my gosh, Matt just absolutely crushed this person and just absolutely decimated them, and he's obviously practicing that, that what you just said really flies in the face of it. It's striving toward authenticity, and when you are that honest version of yourself, and even when you mess up, I know that I've messed up, and I try to watch the live chats during the shows, and if I mess up and somebody says, holy crap, Eric, you totally screwed this up, you got the date wrong or the name wrong or whatever the case is, all you have to do is have the integrity to say, I screwed up. Oh, you know what? Look at this, correction, live, I messed up, here it is. People aren't going to, demand your crucifixion. They genuinely see when you're willing to be wrong.
That's something that you and I do differently. You couldn't pay me to try to pay attention to live chat alongside the show. I don't even know how you do it. I'm not going to tell you how to do your show or anything else. But if I'm on the Atheist Experience and you put that live chat up window next to me, I'm shutting it off, because all it does is prompt me to look at something that's not the person I'm on the phone with talking. Mm-hmm. And if somebody has this pedantic little correction of, he said John 3:16 when he meant, 2 Timothy 2:4, I don't care. That stuff can be corrected after the fact. If I say something incredibly egregious, I would definitely go back and correct it. But if I'm trying to follow what everybody in the chat's saying, mm-hmm. and listen to the person on the phone, and keep in mind that I've got an audience there, I think it's just too much of a distraction for me. I'm amazed that you can do it. I couldn't watch the chat.
You know what? I scan it, and I have times when I know that I can check it. Like when I know that my co-host is going to be going and having this discussion, sure. and I have an idea of where it's going. That's a perfect time to go in.
That would make sense. Yeah.
Otherwise, no, I do generally miss most of it. But if you really screwed something up, one person's not going to tell you. 20 people are going to tell you.
True.
And so it's not like I needed to catch that one comment, because it's now the board for a little while. And
I think one of the other reason I don't, apart from potentially being a distraction for me, is I'm probably going to hear about it after the show, and I'm so hypercritical of what I do on the show that I'll replay the show in my head of memories, which may be some false memories, of saying, oh, I wish I'd have said this, or I should have said that, or I could have said this differently. And we get feedback in, and some of it I agree with, mm-hmm. some of it I don't. Somebody will say, oh, you just need to be kinder and gentler. And I'm like, well, I've tried that. I've tried, 15 years of doing the show. I've tried all different approaches. And if you go back and watch, we're posting this in July of 2019. So mm-hmm. if you watch the 2 episodes that I did most recently, one with Seth and one with Daryl Ray, there was no yelling, there was no hanging up. We didn't even go near the slavery thing. Is it because I was just generally in a better mood? Had I gotten laid recently or had a really good day? Yeah, probably. That's a good chunk of it. But also there's a conscious effort to make sure that I'm happy with what I've done. And if I go off on a rant, which I know some people enjoy, and that becomes the Matt crushes, blah, blah, blah. As long as the content of the rant was something that I am honestly passionate about, and I feel it was justified, cool. Anybody who tells me, oh, you lost your audience there, or you shouldn't drop an F-bomb, because there are people who will just say, oh, well, I'm not going to listen to language like that. Well, sorry. I don't care that much for style over substance. And sometimes that language is essential to get people who are just like listening on autopilot. Oh, here's another debate about God. Hang on a minute. Did he just say fuck God? You know? Wait, what was that? Oh, let me see if I get the context here.
Yep.
I think it's important, but I do read all the feedback and listen. Nobody's going to be harder on me than me.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, if I were to try to follow along with the chat, it would definitely have to be in gaps in the show. And the biggest reason I probably won't do it is because I know it can be handled afterward.
Fair enough. Fair enough. I know that we kind of went far afield of what we sat down
Sure.
to do, but this is a conversation that I really wanted to have on camera. This is all of the questions that I've had for years up until coming in and doing this. And so I'm really glad that we get to have this discussion. And I hope to sit down with you many more times and go over things. And I know that if I really fuck up, you will hold me to account.
I try.
How many times have I gotten out of Talk Heathen and you've been, all right, sit down, here's where you fucked up.
No. Like maybe 2 or 3 times, and it was only about, if I'd have been in the live chat, you would have seen it earlier.
Touche.
Because I'd have been like, no, when you said this, what you really meant was this.
Yeah.
Or you set yourself up for a trap. And the only reason that I even, this isn't, oh, Eric, let me tell you how you're doing this stuff wrong. It's, hang on,
I know.
I screwed this up 5 or 6 times 10 years ago, and here's how you avoid falling into that pit so that your show can ultimately be better than anything I've ever done.
Well, I can't tell you how appreciative I am of you, man. Thank you so much. For everybody watching, thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you next time. All right, and that was the interview. I really hope you enjoyed it. And again, thank you so much for your patience. I'm so sorry that it took so long. Now we are up and going. I have videos scheduled on Patreon for people who want to see it early. For people who are waiting for it to come out, you will start seeing more videos coming out in the coming weeks. I want to get one out every single week. If you like what I do, if you want to be able to send me out to do more debates, it does cost money. And if you'd like to support me, you can go to patreon.com/Eric Murphy. Thank you so much. Take care.